it's Nathalie Nelson Parker here, and traditionally we'll call this Nuggets with Nathalie, but tonight I want to have a candid conversation, an interracial conversation with some of my friends. And I'm not talking about the friends that you just work with or the friends that you have to be around, but these are the friends I literally talk to for hours. So to be truthful, the three of you are probably the only people that I get to talk to for more than 30 minutes, other than, of course, my husband, because I'm just not a person that likes to talk on the phone. So I'm so super happy that you're joining us. And Morgan is also going to join us. He's on the way. So let's just start with some introductions for the people out there who are joining the conversation. First of all, I want you to do this. Stop what you're doing, like, share, tag a friend, let them know that we are having this conversation. Now, this is not a conversation necessarily to talk specifically about police brutality. This is not a conversation to talk specifically about the protests and everything that's going on. Those things will come up, but this is a conversation about what it really means to have asset-based equity. Okay, and so let me tell you why we're having this conversation before my friends introduce themselves. We are having this conversation because your girl is tired.
I'm all tired. I'm all tired.
All the way tired. All right, I am tired. I have gotten 20 speaking requests in the last week and a half.
Yeah.
20.
Yeah.
In the last week and a half. Majority of those requests have been from predominantly white institutions or communities who want to know what it means to be racially dressed. I have gotten a lot of inboxes and text messages asking specifically from my Caucasian brothers and sisters, what books should I read? And I wanted to have this conversation because there's one thing to be culturally competent. There's one thing to be socially aware. It's another thing to be culturally insensitive. And some of us do that consciously or unconsciously. And so I wanted to have this conversation with the people that we've been talking about this with. So let's start with Amber. Amber, go ahead. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and how you got into the work that you're doing now.
Sure. So my name is Amber Lowe Woodfurk. I am a pastor in the CME Church. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi, but I live now in Atlanta, Georgia. I came here for seminary, is where I met my friend Nathalie at the ITC. I got into this work. I think I didn't get into it. I think it was already in me to get into, right? Because again, I'm from Mississippi, and we have such a storied history with civil rights and with organizing and all that good stuff, right? So I think my family history and just where I'm from, I've always had, a desire to do social justice work, but I didn't know how I was going to go about doing that, right, until I moved to Atlanta. And after I finished seminary, I'm also the director of faith outreach for a U.S. Senate campaign right now. And so I think getting into politics, working on campaigns is what really pushed me to also do community organizing. I'm the former faith outreach or assistant faith organizer for the New Georgia Project, which is a 501c3 started by Stacey Abrams. It focuses on voter registration for Black and Brown communities in Georgia because, amen, yes, our leader in Georgia, Stacey Abrams. Yeah, Stacey is so smart. She saw where there's a rise in the demographics, right, when it comes to Black and Brown people. And so she made it her mission to turn this red state into a purple state, right? Or some say blue, some say purple. Right. But to flip the state more or less because of the changing demographics. Right. So I got into organizing through that organization, working with faith communities around issues such as mass incarceration, voting rights, education, a whole host of things. Right. And I'm also the assistant pastor at a local church here in Atlanta as well. So I'm not busy at all.
And a wife and a fur mama.
I'm a wife. I'm a fur mama. I have a cat running around here who may make a cameo in a minute. I'm a PhD student at Clark Atlanta studying English literature. I'm very interested in reading literature as sacred texts. So Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Octavia Butler, those to me are sacred texts, right? Because they are doing theology in a very specific way that theologians, even though I'm a theologian, that theologians don't always do, right? They fill in certain gaps in the literature. Their language does. So that's my thing. And like you, Nathalie, I've been invited to speak and lead protests all week long, right? So I've gotten requests just like you, and I'm also tired. So I have my little glassy glass right here to help me.
Let me get mine.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Come on, water. Turn it into wine, okay?
And my body moisturized.
Yes.
And my body was fresh. Oh my God, I love you, Amber. I love you for who you are, all the work that you do, and your commitment to justice that I believe is integrated wholly in your faith. As a woman, as a preacher, as a scholar, and you make no alms about that. And I think that was the thing that really brought us together as friends and has cemented our friendship. Now,
we're both very blunt girls.
Oh, we are.
I love it.
We're not here to speak truth to power, and that has a lot to do with our theological training and our training at the ITC.
The ITC, no place like it.
Liberation Theology. Kara girl, how you doing?
Hey, good. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. Good to see your face. I miss our lunches.
I know. It's been too long.
It's been too long, but we will have them again.
Yes.
So introduce yourself to the people. Tell them who you are. How did you get to this place? What you do? All of those great things.
Sure. I'm Kara Lassen Oliver. How I got to that place, isn't that a mystery? I'm a Hoosier girl, grew up in Indiana, but I came to Nashville to go to Vanderbilt Divinity School. So like both of you, I just credit so much of where I'm at and how I view the world because of my theological education at Vanderbilt. That was 20 years ago. But right out of seminary, I worked for the United Methodist Church and their denominational youth organization. And that organization, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, the board was made up of teenagers. And as a good United Methodist institution, it had to be very diverse and representative. And so early in my 20s, well, for a white person, early in my 20s, I really had to learn about different communication styles, different cultures, and how that impacted and make a lot of mistakes. But a lot of those young people, now I realize in my 20s and they were in their teens, now as adults, we're peers. And I'm still friends with a lot of those people who taught me so much. I served as a youth pastor soon after that. Young people, I found, have a lot more questions than answers. And that's where I feel most comfortable is with the questions. Anybody with answers, I'm a little suspicious of.
That's right.
So, but then I was briefly a stay-at-home mom. That was a challenging time to be at home with the little ones full time. But that's when I got into writing to try and make a little bit of extra money. So writing curriculum and working for the publishing house and for the Upper Room, who I work for now. But then my family and I, my husband and our 2 children, moved to Malawi, a landlocked nation in the southern Africa. And colonialism is a whole, and missiology is a whole nother Facebook Live. But we went and lived there as volunteers for 2 years and volunteered with the United Methodist Church. And that was like a whole nother of layer being pulled back to see, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but white privilege just isn't even denied there. It's just taken advantage of. there's no denying, there's no gaslighting. It's just like, you're white and Western, you get to do this.
Right.
So that was a whole part of my journey. But while I was there, I started doing publishing work with the United Methodist Church, and developing publishing teams of clergy and lay people and starting small businesses. So instead of the West shipping resources there, we help folks write their own resources.
That is amazing.
So I did that work for 9 years. And then due to some changes in the United Methodist Church, I ended up at the upper room. And now I'm the executive director of the Center for Spiritual Formation. And in the last couple days, even, I've had to really be able to articulate that we're in the upper room is in the business of creating daily life with God. And what does that mean to be anti-racist as you create that daily life with God? What does that mean to be oriented to justice? Spiritual formation is intimately tied to that, and to help folks make and name that connection. So that's where I'm at. It's a lot more administration than an MDiv prepared me for. But I'm really privileged to work. I feel really privileged to work here and with some amazing colleagues like Nathalie.
I love it. I love it. And so, okay, so let's talk about how you guys have been feeling. And Morgan is coming in a little later. But I want to kind of pull up the hood for everyone who's watching. Shout out to everyone out there. Shannon is tuning in from Florida. Don't be afraid to drop your questions, your comments in the comment section. This is a casual but a candid conversation amongst friends. So let's talk a little bit about how you've been feeling in regards to, of course, the video footage of George Floyd, but also other videos are surfacing now that is really showing where we are as a society with racial division. So let's pull up back some of the conversations that you and I have been having before we even decided to make this conversation a live conversation.
Yeah.
So Amber, I'm going to start with you because we texted each other, and I'm going to be quite frank. We texted each other, and I said to her, or you said to me, I don't remember who started the text, but if one more white person asks me what book they should read,
yeah, I'm gonna die. Like, I'm going to die. I'm going to combust into flames, okay, and die. I think we both said that. I think we both said it at the same time. I was like, But yeah, I still have not watched all the way through the George Floyd video. And I told my colleagues at work this the other day. They wanted me to lead the staff meeting and give my experiences, regarding my the protest on the ground, right, in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And so I told them, I said, I have not watched a full video of someone being killed by policemen on camera since Philando Castile. And I can't because it traumatized me. I was pastoring my first church that I was assigned to as senior pastor down in Perry, Georgia, back in 2016. I think that may have happened in 2017. I can't remember. But after I saw that one, and then the Alton Sterling one, I decided that I could no longer, I can't stomach that, right? And so whenever I see videos, I try to scroll past it really fast because it's traumatizing, number one. Number two, I think it really does lead to PTSD. And so I acknowledge, the violence against us, but at the same time, I can't watch it because it's just too much for me personally to bear. But not being able to watch it, though, has not stopped me from participating in the movements, right? So I mentioned that I was involved, and I want to continue to be involved in, in protests throughout Atlanta, right? And making demands of our leadership. It's just that even though I get tired of seeing the footage, and I have gotten tired of seeing the footage, I still have to push my way through that, right? I still have to push my way through it, take time off when needed, but know that I can't stay gone for too long because The movement needs like it not only needs me, it needs all of us, right? And so I wouldn't be doing my part. I wouldn't be fulfilling my calling if I allowed the trauma to relegate me to the sidelines and silence me. Trauma can be silencing, right? Trauma has the power to silence you and make you feel fearful and make you apprehensive to speak out. And I don't want to be fearful or apprehensive. So even though, like you, Nathalie, I'm tired sometimes and traumatized as well, I'm also hopeful because as I told my husband when I got back home, I said there was a feeling in the air, a spirit in the air, and I felt like that spirit was telling me that we can never go back to where we came from. Like something is changing, right? We always say there's a shift in atmosphere, right? In churchy language, right? But I really feel that. I really feel that this country is no longer can be what it has been for centuries because people are just tired, right? I don't want to underestimate the power of being tired and what that can drive people to do and how that can change systems and attitudes and ideas, right? So I'm taking my tiredness and my trauma and I'm using it, right, constructively to help push towards that spirit that I felt, to help grab onto that spirit. Because I don't think that God would do it for us, right? We got to do it ourselves. So I'm hopeful. I'm sad a lot of times. I cry about it, but I'm still hopeful because I see so many young people out in the streets, you know, demanding that this country sees Black and brown folks as human, right? And not just in words, but in policy and actions, in equity, right? In the ways that we redistribute our wealth. I'm hopeful. Though tired, I'm hopeful.
And I love that you recognized, you know, when we see images and videos of police brutality, of racially injustice that is violent, that is trauma inducing for those of us who watch it, for those of us who live it, right? Because there are microaggressions and violence that people of color experience on a daily basis that create, as you said, PTSD. And so,
for sure,
with that being said, I was really, really fatigued this week, like extremely fatigued, because of all of those experiences. And Kara reached out to me and was like, listen, you post this video and I want to repost it. But I am sensitive to what's going on. I'm doing my Kara impersonation because whenever she talks to me, she always does this to welcome me.
You do good impressions, though. You do great impressions.
So even though we're talking on the phone,
you knew she was doing this. That is hilarious.
I have just been called out.
That's how you know your friend.
So Kara's on the phone clutching her pearls and was like, I'm sensitive to everything that's going on. So I'm not asking you to spend your energy on something that I need right now. And she made a concession that was like, this is what asset-based equality is, right? Asset-based equality is not just making representation happen. It's not just opening the doors for people of color. Asset-based equality is giving concessions, doing things to make sure that the ground is equal. And so Kara said to me, I will get the video and I will jot something up if that will be helpful for you. Or she just, the way she presented this situation to me just cemented why I love her, because I was like, this is a person that gets it. Everyone else has not contacted me, has not invited me to speak before, has not supported the National Network of Young Adults, have not supported my programs under Nathalie Nelson Parker brand, but are asking me during this traumatic time, during this global pandemic,
to expend your energy that you already don't have in the first place because you're tired.
Right.
Yeah.
And Kara got it. So Kara, can you talk a little bit about that interaction and what prompted you to do it in that way?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I started doing a more intentional work in anti-racism about 2 years ago. And I started with a book it's a workbook called White Supremacy and Me by Layla F. Saad. And she is very clear when you download, now when you buy, that's another thing, pay people of color for their work. But when you buy her book, she is very clear. She's like, racism is a white person's problem, and you have to do your own work. I am not here to support you through that. You need to find other white people to support you through that. She would make some space when she had the time and energy for comments. But other than that, she was very clear in this book. It's where in divinity school, in reading, I had learned about systemic oppression, and I knew the right language to use. But in that workbook, I learned about tone policing. I learned about white fragility. I learned about Black joy and how white people try to snuff that out, or it makes us uncomfortable. So she gave language to a lot of the racism that is just in the water, and my own racism. She gave language to it. So I heard her clearly saying, do not ask Black folks for emotional energy they don't have to give you. And that was 2 years ago. And so I've continued to try and do that work and pay attention. And then when all of this exploded, again, for public view, I saw so many folks in my Instagram feed on Facebook saying, Black folks saying, do not DM me. Don't do it. And then another post saying, you're still doing it. So I made a commitment personally, and the upper room made a commitment that we wanted to amplify Black voices, but only if that content came to us. So that's why I said, Nathalie, you have already put this out there for the world. And we would like to amplify your voice, but not at any emotional or spiritual cost to you. And God is faithful, right? Like once we made that commitment, we have people sending us things. Another pastor that I've been in contact with for several months, I emailed her to say, you sent us a prayer. It was more COVID related. We're not going to post it just yet. And she said, oh, well, I wrote this one this week about George Floyd. You can post that one. So again, not asking for energy, but honoring energy that is already being offered for the good of the world.
I love that. And that's why together, as we've had these conversations, we decided to title this conversation, Do Your Homework. It is your responsibility to do the work, whether you're a person of color or whether you're Caucasian or whether you're a person of influence and affluence or wherever it is your work to do.
That's correct.
The notion that reading one book or just having one experience is going to help you better understand racial injustice is funny. So Amber texted me something, and I'm going to allow her to share it because
yeah. And if you will let me, I want to first read the tweet that prompted that text, right, Nathalie? So a friend of mine named Robert Reese, he and I went to undergrad together at Ole Miss. He's assistant professor of sociology at UT Austin. He wrote this on Twitter. He said, I have mixed feelings about those popular how to talk about race books that have been popping up. I think the way to learn how to talk about race is to study a lot. The history, the theory, the data, the debates. You can't package that shit into a bulleted anti-racism guide. And his second tweet reads, it's not supposed to be easy and convenient. I'm not interested in making the study of race something that soccer moms can do in their spare time. It's hard, it's challenging. Race and racism are big, complex topics. You can't just read a pamphlet and then move on. And so what I texted Nathalie with that in mind, I said, it is a form of white privilege to think that a book, one book, two books, a bibliography, right, a how-to guide, at the last minute when the fire is hot, that you can read this stuff now and then, get it. It is a lifelong work. Even being a Black person, you don't understand from birth, right? All of the systemic, ideologies that go into anti-Blackness and racism and ontological Blackness, right? Like I didn't know what ontological Blackness was until I got to seminary,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the whole idea that Blackness itself is something that whiteness created to justify the slave trade, right? I didn't know that until I got to seminary. And so again, it is a lifelong journey. So again, to ask, as you were saying, Kara, to ask Black folks in this time to help you build, your library or your cachet, right? To help you understand the pain that we've been feeling for hundreds of years in this country. Like I told Nathalie, that's a form of white privilege, right? And I don't want to participate in that. I mean, I had to do it for work, because it's part of my work, right? But other than what I'm getting paid to do, see, that's my job, right? But other than what I'm getting paid to do, as you were saying, Kara, like pay folks for their work. That is emotional labor. That is intellectual labor, right? That means that I have to step outside of my trauma for a second. That means that I have to, get to a space to do work. I got to go to my library and figure out, okay, what set of books will be a comprehensive guide for you as you try to understand what I'm feeling right now. And don't ask me, because I'm gonna give you a whole bookshelf full of shit, okay?
Yep.
I'm gonna give you some theory. I'm gonna give you some fiction and some nonfiction, right? I'm gonna give you all kinds of things, some theology, some sociology, all that good stuff, right? But at the same time, again, it's a form of privilege to think that you can get it overnight, or that you can get it in a year or in 2 years or in 3 years, right? It's a lifelong commitment, because there are still things that I'm learning myself about race and racism and anti-Blackness, and just the idea that, first of all, it also stems to capitalism as well. So I'm still learning about capitalism on top of all that, right? About imperialism, about all this compounds together to create anti-Blackness. So yes, I texted all that for Nathalie. I was like, don't let me forget to say this on the thing tomorrow. On the thing. Don't let me forget to say it.
So I want to frame this I'm going to play a video for everyone who's watching. So for our Caucasian brothers and sisters who are like, how do I know what privilege is? How do I understand what racial equity is and means? And then for African Americans and people of color who are experience injustice and really can't put language around what it is we're really asking for when we protest and march. What is asset-based equity? And I watched the funeral of George Floyd, and there was something that Al Sharpton said that really spoke to me. He said, "Don't do us any favors. Just get your foot off our neck." And I feel like this video kind of paints that portrait for whichever side of the spectrum you're on as far as racial representation. So I'm going to show this video. You guys, please go ahead, like, share, comment, tag a friend, and continue to join us in the conversation.
Shoulder to shoulder, take off your backpacks. Basketball, line up, we're about to race. Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this, a $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm going to make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married? Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability. You don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go! If you didn't learn anything from this activity, you're a fool.
All right, Kara. What did you feel? What's bubbling up for you?
I think what this raises for me is moving it all from the head to the heart and like embodying it. And like I said, I didn't understand my privilege until I saw it hurt somebody. I didn't understand. I mean, this is just a classic example for me. I met Nathalie because I am a white person from the upper room serving on the Strengthening the Black Church for the 21st Century board, because the upper room doesn't have enough diversity for a Black person to sit on that board. But by serving on that board, I witnessed an entire board of Black leaders in our church experience racism from a guard in our building. And I can't read about that in a book and have it change my life. But to watch that happen and to watch one of the most respected bishops in our church, in our denomination, have to deal with that before she went to do the work that she's called to do. So I think white folks, we have to put ourselves in places where we're uncomfortable. I mean, it's a danger of being performative too, but like we have to go into the bookstore and buy a stack of Black authors. We have to show up in Black worship services, not once, but consistently. We have to risk asking Nathalie to go to lunch and not knowing what she'll say because maybe the racial barriers are too big. And maybe George Floyd and Breonna Taylor have just been killed and she doesn't want to talk to me. But I still want to text and say, you're my friend and I'm thinking about you. But it has to be embodied. That's the incarceration. That's the incarnation of our faith. And so that's what it brings up for me. How do we feel it viscerally and begin to live it out and not just read about it or tweet about it or post about it?
You're not going to make me cry today. This is not happening now.
No. Nathalie, I feel like every time we get together, we always cry about something.
Always.
Every time. So go ahead and cry.
That's right.
Always.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of something you said, and I love that. It has to be relational and not transactional.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about asset-based equity, it's not necessarily showing pity or piety to people of color, but it's transformational, changing the dynamic of power, changing oppression to justice, and having relationships with African Americans and communities of color in a way that you understand the assets that we bring to the table, and you leverage that through relationship, not through unequal power dynamics. And
right.
What you said the other day was like, it is not Black people's responsibility.
Yeah, it's not to educate you. Like,
It's
and I've
not.
been saying this for a while now. I think, like, again, when I started pastoring, I had just a whole different level of consciousness about Black things. I don't know what it was, like, but just seeing different Black people in different Black spaces gave me just a whole new outlook on what it means to be Black in its various ways, right? And I don't know what happened one day, but I was either in Bible study at church with my congregation or in worship, but we were talking about something and I was like, yeah, y'all know what? It is not our job to educate, the oppressor on their oppression. Like, you know that you embody privilege, you know that you have, used it as a tool. You have weaponized your privilege. First of all, you gave yourself privilege, you weaponized it, and then you dehumanized us for so, like, it is not my job to tell you about yourself. Like, right? And so I'm thankful for folks like Kara and others who say, something, let me first of all stop again putting even more burden on those who have to deal with this every day. Maybe not directly they do, but some way indirectly, just seeing that their Black brothers and sisters are dealing with this too, it also affects them, as well. So yeah, it's not my job to tell you, that you benefit from whiteness. Like, that. And once you know that, I think both of you all have said this. Once you know that, then what? Then what do you give up, right? What do you relinquish? What do you give back to Black and brown communities that don't have what you have been privileged to have, not blessed, but privileged to have, right? For so long. So the grand gestures, like you said, Kara, performative gestures, right? About Black Lives Mattering don't move me. What are you giving up to prove and to show that you really believe that Black Lives Matter and that we have not been invested in the same way that you've been invested in, right?
Awesome. I love that. And I want to bring Morgan's voice into the room. He's here.
He
had some technical difficulties. He wasn't able to log on, but he's in the comment section.
Oh, okay.
Shout out to Morgan. He said, so sorry to miss this important conversation. Thankful for each of you. But Morgan and I have been talking, and what I love about Morgan is, as a white male, he is very intentional about the ways that he's creating space, and he serves as the executive director of the Wesley Foundation of the University of Memphis. And so he's been hosting these conversations, as well as on his Facebook, kind of doing these Dare White People posts.
Yeah, I love it. I'm here for it. Get your people together.
that white people could become allies in social justice. And what I really loved about Morgan is that he's not just about representation of diversity, but he's really intentional about, as we're having conversation about racial injustice, he's not putting African Americans and people of color in a space to have to tell white people about whiteness. He's creating intentional space that is loving, supportive, and sacred. And so he shared with me a conversation that he had with a Caucasian woman who was just like, she was distraught. And I could understand that because you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
And so she reached out and was like, what should I do? And he gave her 3 simple steps. He said, 1, go watch Just Mercy.
Yeah.
Go watch this movie.
Great movie.
Right. He said, 2, after you watch the movie, go and donate to a Black organization, a Black-owned organization, or organization that is specifically serving Black and brown communities. And then the 3rd step was, and this is for our Caucasian brothers and sisters and allies, then he said 3, post it on your social media platforms, not to congratulate yourself, but to challenge your friends, families, constituents to go and do the same. Because it can't just be prayer. It also has to be work.
That's correct.
You also have to put some effort in, like you said, to invest in the books that are Black owned, to put your dollar in organizations that are impacting Black communities.
Yes.
Listen, when you start to divest from oppressive structures and oppressive communities and invest in those who have been oppressed, that's the impact right there.
Yep.
Yeah. When you stop shopping at places that devalue and dehumanize Black and brown lives, and you invest in those that humanize and that see and that cater to and that nurture our communities, that's most of it right there.
And that is so appropriate because it speaks to how the nation is listening and watching at this time, after windows were busted, after businesses were impacted. Another thing that someone said to me was that exhaustion is a tool of the empire.
Yes. Who said that?
Shout out to Tyler Sitt.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, that is good.
He's out. We have another ally. He is out in Minneapolis now. Phenomenal pastor, great friend. And when he said that, it just resonated to me. He said rest is also an act of resistance. So how are predominantly white organizations, institutions providing space for African American and Black communities, brown communities to experience rest, right? So there's a couple of ways that you can do it. Pay a Black person the same amount of money that you pay a white person with the same amount of experience, education, you name it. One. That's number 1, particularly for Black women who are the most educated and the most experienced in a lot of
Studies show every year. Like, we coming for these degrees every year.
The intersection, right? It's like, oh, yes.
That's correct, Kara.
Talk a little bit more about the intersection, Kara.
Well, it's all so layered. I mean, even the fact that these 2 pandemics are hitting at the same time, like, you know, I mean, a little bit, I think it was right before we got on, like if there is any glimmer of hope, it's that people aren't traveling. They're not getting on planes. They're not consumed by business meetings. Like, all of our focus is on this. But it's really, I was watching another Facebook Live about what it means to be a Black man in America. And the conversation was at least half, it became a conversation about queer and transgendered folks, Black folks, which is absolutely important to be talking about right now. But you could feel the facilitator kind of like, wait, the name of the Facebook Live was this, but we're talking about this. and those were all Black men. So then if you add the layer of gender, or if you add a layer, like we were talking about, of global or international.
So many different layers that got to be accounted for.
Yeah. And so we can't get it right every time, but at least to acknowledge this is complicated. And one of the things, Oshita Moore is an author and Instagrammer and educator. This week, she told white folks, all I want to hear is, I'm sorry, I'm listening, and I'm learning. And she said, finish those with very specific things, not those. What are you sorry for? Who are you listening to? And what specifically have you learned? And tell other white folks.
Yes.
So that's been really helpful this week, this life.
I love that. And I think, when you talk about the intersections, I think what we are saying in regards to equity-based justice and asset-based equity is translated across racial lines, right? Mm-hmm. So the Black church and Black organizations also need to know asset-based equity when it comes to issues of gender.
That's a whole other, yes, ma'am. I was just talking to somebody about that today.
Yeah. When we talk about LGBTQI brothers and sisters, asset-based equity is not just a racial thing. Culturally, all
it's of those. Gender, it's class.
Yeah, go ahead, Amber. Go ahead, love.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's race, it's gender, and it's class, and gender identities, right? Not just one gender, but gender identities, right? But the fight for justice. I wish I had my little protest sign in here because I wrote that on my sign. The fight for justice must be intersectional. If it's not, then you're fighting for privilege. Mm-hmm. Right, you're fighting to occupy the same space. To me, as whiteness, right? If it does not, if justice for you does not see how being a Black woman or being a Black gay woman or being a Black poor gay woman or whatever, all these different things, right? All these different layers. If you're fighting for justice that does not recognize how I am uniquely oppressed, on top of being a Black woman, it's not justice. Again, you're fighting for privilege at that point.
That is so true.
And your friend must be a Marxist, the one who said that exhaustion is a tool of the empire. Karl Marx says that I'm paraphrasing, right? But I mean, part of the theory is that if you're too tired to fight back, that's what the empire wants, right? It wants to work you down. It wants to weigh you down. It wants you to work night and day, so that you don't think about the structures and things that oppress you, and you accept it as reality, right?
You know what's so funny about that? And Kara, you kind of mentioned it. I think that's the grace and the providence of God that this movement came after a global pandemic, and I don't say that I believe God created the pandemic. Right. I don't say that with not recognizing what this time means in people's life, like the unemployment rate, the financial crisis, the lives that have been lost. I understand that. But there's also this sense within me that we would not have the energy, the opportunity, or the time to protest in the way that we are and in the multiplicity of ways that we are. If we were not in a global pandemic.
Yeah.
Did you watch Trevor Noah's? Trevor Noah did a thing just sitting on his couch, but he talked about the dominoes, and the pandemic was one of the first dominoes, and now here, and hopefully it's all toppling.
Yeah. But, tear it all down.
Yeah.
Knock it all over. Mm-hmm. Knock it all over. Seriously. And y'all know something, Carrie and Nathalie? I was talking to a friend just last night about what it means to knock it all over or burn it all down, right? And me, Nat, I'm a radical. I'm with it all.
I think that's why the two of us get along so well.
Right, exactly.
Bring it on.
Listen, but even with that, I was like, bro, I was in my car going somewhere yesterday, and I was like, do I really do I fully understand what it means to burn it all down? That means that I'm gonna lose my privilege too.
Yes.
That means that even though I am part of a historically oppressed group of people, you know, still that means that whatever I have gained, you know, in spite of empire, I'm gonna have to give it up as well, for the purposes of starting over, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have to be comfortable, and unafraid to let that go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had to come to terms with, again, what that means, and it may seem scary to some, but I'm like, if you are fully invested in liberation, even you being a privileged oppressed person still got to give up something, right?
No, so true. And I recognize, to a white man, your life might not seem privileged, but for someone like me, just to be transparent, first generation American, my parents are immigrants.
Yes.
My mom and dad separated when I was 5, so I was raised by a single mom. I was born in Far Rockaway, New York, which is the inner city. All of these different strikes were against me. Nonetheless, I'm still a graduate of Ivy League institutions. I have 3 degrees. I own a business. I own a house. There are all of these other accomplishments of the American dream that have afforded me a level of privilege in my life. And so it is my responsibility to not only pay it forward or reach back, as people say, but it's my responsibility to live my life differently. It is my responsibility to not only decenter whiteness, but to decenter the things and the notions of what it means to be worthy, right? And so that's why for me, I'm committed to being a transformational leader, because that means I lead not from a place of hoarding power and control, but I lead from a place of flat leadership, understanding that every voice matters, understanding that in every decision that I make, that I'm not the only decision maker. And that takes intentionality. Can you talk about, and then you can go first, Amber, and Kara, you can jump in. Can you talk about how equity is not just something that is socially correct, politically correct, but is a theological mandate?
Yes, it is. So funny you asked that question. So just last week, dear friend of mine, you know him too, Nathalie, Reverend Billy Honor, and I just had a Facebook Live on Pentecost.
Billy. We're gonna all three get together soon.
Yes, my former co-worker got me into this organizing stuff. Like, I love him to death. But he and I just had a Facebook Live last week as part of my Facebook Live series on Bible study, right? Or Bible studies, and we focused on Pentecost, right? Because last Sunday was the beginning of the new liturgical season, and so we really focused on what it meant for the Holy Spirit to be egalitarian, right? For it to pour out on everyone, despite their gender, their nationality, right? Their socioeconomic position. What that means is, and so what that means is equity is a theological disruption of empire, right? Equity, in terms of a mandated, or in terms of a form of theological justice, means that those who have used God's name and have positioned themselves as God for so long now are now confronted with a different what's the word I'm looking for? A different approach, right? For what it means to have power, what it means to wield and to use one's power, and what it means to be empowered. And what it means to be empowered does not always mean that you have to use your power against someone else for their oppression, right? Equity as a theological ethic, right, means that God does not, even though ethnicity may be natural, right, even though gender and gender identities, may be natural, does not mean that these other stratifications are natural. And that God's spirit equalizes and equitizes everyone, so that even though we all have different abilities, those different abilities are still honored, right? And that I'm not looked at as lesser than because of my ethnicity or because of my gender identities or gender identity, right? I'm looked at as a part of a whole, and I'm looked at as an asset, right, in community, and that no one person or no one person's assets are greater than my own, right? So we literally just had this conversation last week. So yeah.
You know what's so powerful about that? In order to do that, you have to decenter whiteness.
Yeah.
That's correct. You have to decenter old notions of power. You have to decenter what it has typically meant to be empowered. And what it has typically meant to be empowered means that someone is at the top and someone's at the bottom, and that is a natural order of life, and it's not. Now I think that sometimes divisions may be, like I say, natural part of life, right? When it comes to ethnicity, when it comes to gender, and all these different things, right? But these man-made classifications like class and race and all this other, no, that's not what God desires. At least the God I serve, and worship. I don't think God desires that. I think God desires for us to acknowledge the beautiful mosaic that we all are, and that everyone has a place and a unique voice, and that no one's voice and no one's place is higher and better and more privileged, or should be more privileged than the other, right? So that's how we interpreted that whole Pentecost text, right? And that's how I interpret God to be. But unless you begin with that starting point, everything you do is going to privilege you over someone else.
Yeah, and I love that, because so we talked about decentering whiteness, decentering power.
Yes.
If you don't, everything will fall in those isms, schism
That's
lines,
correct.
whether it's intentional, unintentional, conscious, or unconscious. And so I think we see that so much in the work in the ministry of Jesus throughout the text, whether it's sitting at the mountain with everybody and feeding everyone, taking someone's meal and using it to equally distribute amongst others, to see that in men and women as disciples, even though we only say that there's 12, we understand
that there are many.
That's right.
Yeah, and there are women too. And something, Nathalie, and I got to hush because I know Kara has to add as well, but even Jesus had to decenter himself. Right. Even he had to recognize
it. Like, share, comment right now.
Girl, it's gonna get real. Even your Jesus had to be called out by a woman of a different ethnicity to say that you have centered yourself for so long that you think that God's grace, God's providence, God's mercy is only reserved for you and your people. No, God is for everyone. And while you are centering yourself, realize that we're all fighting the same battle. Right? It's just like poor white people who think that because they're not Black, they're better. No, we're all fighting classism and capitalism, right? We're all fighting that same common enemy. So even Jesus had to be called out and decenter himself, and his privilege as one who comes from a tradition that taught him that they were God's chosen people. The fact that we are all made and created by God means that we're all chosen, right? And so how do we all walk in our chosenness without, disempowering and disenfranchising someone else? So even Jesus had to learn. That Samaritan woman and that Canaanite woman, yes, they did.
The women.
The women taught him, and he learned.
That's right. Okay, so I want to test something. So was Jesus incarnation God decentering God's self?
Ooh.
Is it?
Yeah. That's a good question.
I'm dead. You rocked me with that one.
Ask the question, Kara.
like right?
Ask the question.
I might apply for a PhD. That's a whole question.
That's a whole
thing.
That's a whole question. And I think it's a valid question, Kara, because God could have chosen to show up as anybody. Right?
Anybody, anything, any.
And then the Holy Spirit is the equity. The Holy Spirit is the.
Yes.
Okay, we just need a few more hours. We just need a few more hours. But I'm so glad you brought up Pentecost, because Eric Law wrote the devotions in the book called Disciplines leading up to Pentecost. And he said Pentecost was the Spirit inspiring speakers and inspiring listeners.
Oh, yeah.
He said everyone had to listen in their own language. Yes.
Come on, listen.
Eric
Listening
Law.
is also an act of resistance.
Eric Law. Yes.
That's
okay. This is the last thing I'll say.
Write that down, Carol.
When I get my PhD, I'm crediting you all.
Oh my God.
Somebody say yes.
So Rabbi Sandy Sasso is a rabbi in Indianapolis, and she writes children's books. And she wrote a book, I think it's called The Name for God. And everybody said, the farmer said God is the provider, all of the things. But at the end, it's everyone who had their claim on God's name standing around a lake. And everyone looking into the lake and seeing everyone's reflection. And they're like, that is the name for God.
Yeah, that's God.
That's it.
God is everything. God is creation.
So it's so arrogant. That's where it's so arrogant to think that anybody's at the center of any of this.
Even Jesus.
Jesus.
Yeah, he had to, even in his human, because we always are so quick to give him total divinity, right? Right. But Jesus shows that he is human and finite. Because if you are human and finite, you have to learn.
Yeah.
You have to be taught. You have to be in conversation. You have to struggle theologically, right? And that's what he did several times. And each time he did, in my read of a text, right, in my hermeneutic, each time he did, it was due to the women who challenged him.
Yep, for sure.
I feel like we might need to have a part 2 women's conversation.
Girl, yes.
Morgan, we really do miss you.
We do miss you.
Where are you, sir?
Ladies, you are watching. Drop if you want us to do another conversation, candid conversation, ladies' night edition.
Yes, I love this. I love this for real.
Oh gosh.
I love the communion is kicking in. We're having way too much fun.
Oh yeah, mine is too, girl.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about resources. So we did say don't DM us.
Like a 2-minute break, and then you keep talking, okay? Keep talking.
Oh my gosh.
So, Karen, let's go back to what you said. You said do not ask Black people what books they should read. Do the work yourself. So talk about you also said hire. Can you talk about why that's important?
Yeah, so I think there are lots of very well educated, decentered white folks offering resources out there. And lots of them do offer it for free, just to acknowledge their privilege in this. But there are lots of folks, Rachel Cargill, Austin Channing Brown, Oshita Moore, Check Your Privilege, Layla Absad, who do this for a living. They are offering, Nathalie Nelson Parker, offering their emotional and spiritual experience and energy to make us better. And there's an economic cost that is associated with that. And so I want to be a white person who is helping to educate. And I also have to feed my family. But if we're going to be serious about decentering economic resources, decentering voice, decentering all of that, we need to pay for the sacrifice that Black folks and people of color are making to bring down these institutions. And something Amber said, and I'll repeat this when she gets back. But she said something about white people know and use their power intentionally. And you know what?
Talk about it.
White people don't know. You know, I just talked after Amy Cooper and the incident in Central Park. One of my Black male friends said, "Where do you learn to do that?" And I was like, I can tell you that I know how to do exactly what Amy Cooper did, but my mom did not pull me aside. There was no, like, it wasn't taught in Sunday school in my white church. It's in the water, it's in the air, it's the gaslighting that happens that tells white people you don't have privilege. And so white folks listening, you have privilege. You are racist. I am racist. And so it's important to find white folks who have done the work and ask them the questions. Like, I will share my contact information. And there are lots of white folks doing the work, but ask them what to read and what you don't understand. And when you're angry at me, call and tell me why you're angry at me for what I'm saying, and we'll try and work it out together.
That is so powerful, Kara. Thank you for your transparency and just how you are.
Well, again, I am sorry that it's taken me so long to get here. And I am listening and learning every day.
Oh, I appreciate you for saying that. Amber, so Kara was sharing the importance of, one, making sure that if you are serious about the work, don't just pray, but if you're serious about the work, to make sure that you invest in resources, programs that are created and curated by African American and people of color. And that is asset-based equity. Not asking what book should I read, but doing the work and investing in that and paying equitable, right? Paying a African American, a person of color, the same as you would a white man or a white organization.
Exactly. Yeah, put your money where your mouth is. You know, at the end of the day, as I kind of alluded to earlier, you know, the whole idea of race and Blackness and, you know, that begat chattel slavery was all based on money. Right. It was all based on capital.
Hold on, put a pin, because I know what you're gonna say is amazing. So we watched that video with the Head Start, right?
Yeah.
White people, and you know, I'm just gonna say it like I say it.
Yeah.
You have had 400 years.
Right.
400 years of free slavery to garner generational wealth.
That's correct.
Okay,
that is correct.
Right.
No, that's correct, Nathalie. And Jerry and my husband, he's so smart. Like, he is a math nerd. He's an economics like buff and stock market guru and whatnot, right? And so he was just like, it's so crazy how with historic unemployment, the stock market is booming like this week, right? And I said, you know something, you have to have capital to invest in the stock market. Number one. Number two, we got on this whole tangent about homeownership being, you know, the pathway to wealth. And that's not always true. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. But the heart of what we got to is that, you know, you can buy a home, you can invest in the stock market, you can do all these different things if you have, you know, what's called disposable income that allows you to do that. And when you have that on top of, you know, generational wealth or because of that wealth, right? You know, no wonder you have a head start. And we can't demonize people for not having what we think they should have when, you know, they were not afforded that for centuries and centuries. You know, me owning a home, my husband and I owning a home does not undo centuries of oppression when it comes to the ways in which Black folks have been redlined out of communities, right? When it comes to the way that Black folks have been denied loans, when it comes to the way that Black folks, you know, again, point blank period, have been enslaved for, you know, for centuries, right?
And are now incarcerated, which is the
exactly another form of slavery.
Right.
Exactly. So
because of an injustice system, because of over policing in Black and brown communities, it's just this ripple of
it's a constant cycle, and it's not just because of policing. It's also because that inherently you don't think that I'm human. You still do not see Black people as human. You still see us as 3/5, if not less, you know, than that, as human, right? And so, again, I'm all for, you know, white people and people, you know, with the money and with the power to not just say it in words. You know, we saw today where the mayor of DC, you know, had people to paint Black Lives Matter, right, for blocks and blocks and blocks. And that's beautiful. It's a great display, right? At the same time, DC is one of the worst cities when it comes to Black public school education, when it comes to Black housing or housing for Black people, when it comes to just overall socioeconomic well-being, right? So while that was a great grand gesture, how are you investing in those communities that you claim now matter? And I think the mayor of LA did it best when he took, I think it was $150 million away from the police department and put it into Black and brown communities.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yes. Like you cannot expect a Black or a brown person in this country to be a productive citizen and to not commit crimes and to not steal and kill and all these different things if they don't have the investment. My favorite book, one of my favorite books, is Richard Wright's Native Son. And it perfectly sums up everything we're saying right now. If you don't invest, right, if you have Black folks living on top of each other, you know, if you have created, you know, these conditions, you know, that devalue my humanity and don't see me as a human, that are dehumanizing, even when it comes to housing, what do you expect? How do you expect folks to act and to be in society? You can't expect me to have a full conversation with you as a white person. You can't expect me to know how to carry myself. You can't expect me, you know, to have a consciousness of self, of myself even, right? And so again, add that to your reading list, Native Son by Richard Wright. You know, because it's all about equity. It's all about where you put your money and where you don't put your money, and the consequences of not putting your money in communities that you have, you know, again, devalued for so long. And don't be surprised when you see crime, when you see people not even loving themselves. Right.
I think that's so important, and then Kara jump in, because then the issue is not necessarily race, because the issue is really economic freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
Because poverty is indicative of violence. Poverty is indicative.
And studies have shown that from time and time again. Studies correlate the connection between poverty and crime. And we use racial language to justify what people are criminal. We say because you're Black, you're inherently criminal. No, because I'm poor.
Yeah.
And I'm more likely to be poor because of the way the system is oppressively embedded with racial and economic stratification. Go ahead, Kara.
Well, I was just saying that a theme through these two pandemics is bail, right? Like, because during COVID, there's this call, like, please, everybody that's on parole, let them out of jail, because so they don't catch COVID. And then we see these protesters who get arrested and don't have the disposable income you're talking about to pay bail. So then they're incarcerated in a COVID prison. Like,
Yeah, but corporations also get bailed out though. They get bailed.
They
Corporations
got
get
the
bailed.
money. They got more than, what was it, $2,500?
Yeah, millions, trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
And bail for their businesses.
So how it's like?
Okay, guys. Final nugget, because I missed
This
you.
is good.
We probably will, if you guys weren't here, we probably would have been talking for 2 more hours. But I had a kitty patter of little feet upstairs, so that means we on the 4th is back. Last nugget, I want you to share kind of like your final word and your suggested resource, and where people can find you and stay connected with you. Someone just chimed in. At the same time, we must educate our community as how to get past slavery mentality, and we must educate our people. So true. Thanks for sharing, Judith. Go ahead, Kara. Start us off.
A last nugget. I mean, I would just encourage white folks to get on Google. Like, like that's it. Just educate yourselves and don't push yourself into uncomfortable situations and uncomfortable conversations. I'm Wesleyan through and through, and grace abounds. And we just have to keep trying. And you can. I mentioned a bunch of resources. I think for some people, for some white folks, it's easier to hear this from a white person first. So I would encourage you to look up Robin DiAngelo. She has a free video. If you Google her name and click videos, you will find a beautiful video of hers produced by the General Commission on Religion and Race of the United Methodist Church. And then beyond that, get on Instagram. There are a million ways that you can educate yourself, but you can also reach out to me at Kara, KARA.Oliver@gmail.com. And I'm happy to engage. I'm also on Instagram. I think it's k.lassenoliver. And I don't get on Facebook very much, except for fun things like this. So that's how to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Thank you, Kara.
You know what, Nathalie? Just real quick, I never mentioned that I am married and I have 2 children.
Kara's like, oh, I forgot.
I forgot I have kids and a husband.
And they are a very important part of my life. And my daughter is 20 years old, and she has been one of the.
I'm sorry, wife. I'm so sorry.
What?
I'm sorry.
Oh, she has been one of the best conversation partners in all of this for the past few weeks, and generally in life. But so I do want to give a shout out to my family.
Shout out to the family. Kara, what's your email again that you shared? Was it KaraOliver@gmail?
Kara.Oliver.
Perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
So I am putting that in the chat section so you can stay connected with Kara. Amber, go ahead. Give us your last nugget and your resource suggestion.
Yeah. So first, you can follow me on Twitter at RevrunLowe. That's my Twitter, Reverend Lowe. Also on Instagram at its Amber AmberLowe. And on Facebook at Amber Louisa Lowe Woodfurk. That's Amber Louisa LOUISA Lowe Woodfurk WOODFORK. But my last nugget is do the education, right? I think my husband, he's a little bit older than me, and he always tells me that whenever he was in school at Clark Atlanta in the 90s, you had hoteps, as they call them, right? Who were really big on the phrase and on the mantra, do the education, or do the knowledge, right? Do the knowledge. And so if you really want to be about this life of undoing the centuries of systematic ills in this country and worldwide, frankly, if you are really invested or if you want to be invested in making the playing field equitable, right? Number one, do the knowledge. That means read, research, and even I think Kara is right, about Googling, but even Google is biased. So when you type in, for example, Black teenagers, you'll see, for example, images of Black kids, you know, with mugshots or fighting or that kind of thing. But when you Google white teens, you see something else, right? So even be careful on Google, because it's also a racialized tool that is used to color your imagination and your thought process on what Blackness is, right, and what it is not. So number one, do the knowledge, do the education, and number two, as we've already said, put your money where your mouth is. You know, if you are really interested in Black life and Black life mattering, if you are really interested in making America, you know, the best it can be for everyone, then invest. Invest in our communities, invest in our schools, in our churches, in our institutions, right? Call on your and not just that, not just doing, you know, knowledge for self or investing in yourself, but talk to your family and your friends. I posted a video earlier on my Facebook. You know, it was a young girl, young white girl, maybe like 13, 14 years old, calling out her parents on their racism, right? And that may seem uncomfortable for many folks. But I mean, I've lost, you know, family and friends over my stance on, you know, respecting those who are of the LGBTQ community, right? So if I can have hard conversations about respecting one's right to love who they love and be who they be, right, when it comes to, you know, gender and sexuality and whatnot, then you can do that too when it comes to race as well. So do not be afraid to distance yourself from family and friends who don't value black and brown life. If they don't value Black and brown life, then why would you want to be, you know, why would you want to be in the same space as that? Don't feel bad about, you know, about disowning someone, because our lives are at stake. Okay, Black and brown lives are at stake. And the more you coddle and the more you excuse behaviors from your family and friends as that being just who they are and what they've always been, that leads to more and more deaths, you know, spiritually and physically when it comes to Black life, you know, in this country. So do the knowledge, right? Invest and check your family and friends. Amen.
Absolutely. My last nugget would be a compilation of all of that. Whether you are Black, white, male, female, gay, straight, anywhere within the spectrum, the work is yours to do.
Yes.
Do not expect anyone else to do the work. It first starts with you. And however God is calling and speaking to you to show justice and to be justice in the world, you need to be very clear about that. You need to be committed to that and understand that it's a process. Whether it's protesting, whether it's posting on social media, whether it's writing a book, singing a song, however God is calling you to show equity in the world, no one could do it but you. And so my last nugget is do the work yourself. And that's why we titled this, Do Your Homework. And so we want to make sure that you understand that it's first going to start within, and then it's going to be the process in which you personally lean into that type of transformation. Some resources for you. You can go to nathalienelsonparker.com book if you want to understand the resources around what it means to be a transformational leader. So I share my story in there, and then I give some resources to how we were able to use this framework. And it's intentional, right? Every day we have to be committed to doing this work. And so that's available at nathalienelsonparker.com/books. If you want to go ahead and get that, you can go to nathalienelsonparker.com/books to get your copy of the resource guide, The Transformational Leader. Now, if you are a nonprofit organization and you're interested in grants, we've curated a list just for you. It's a free download. This is a free resource. You can go to nathalienelsonparker.com/racial justice grants. There's over 80 grants of organizations and funders who are committed to doing racially just work in African American and communities of color. So that's a free download. You can go there to nathalienelsonparker.com and get that. Now, if you're an organization and you're saying, listen, I need some people of color to help walk us through this, we have on my website, we have the Transformational Leaders online course. That's an option for you. Kara, share some ways that people can get some resources from your organization. And then Amber, I would love for you to talk about ways people can get politically involved.
Yes.
So I work for the Upper Room, which is an 85-year-old organization that started with a single daily devotional book. And now we offer international programs in spiritual formation and publishing. And you can go to upperroom.org. And at the bottom, you will see 3 boxes. The first box has resources related to spiritual formation and support and journeying with you together on COVID-19. And the middle box is the spiritual formation work of anti-racism. And this week and next week and in the foreseeable future, we will be amplifying Black voices and people of color about how to be spiritually formed and be faithful disciples in this work.
Amen. Amber Lowe Woodfurk.
Yep. When it comes to being involved in politics, like I say, I am number one big on community organizing, but also I understand the importance of having the right folks in office. So if you want to see, representation, either volunteer on someone's campaign that you believe in, aligns with your, with your beliefs and ideas, and possibly staff that campaign. I didn't staff my first campaign until 2016. A friend of mine who is heavily involved in politics called me up and said, "Hey, I need someone to be a faith outreach director for a local mayor's race. Can you do it?" I looked him up, I researched him, and from there I got involved in campaigns, right? And so I again, if you want to see the change that we're talking about, it also starts with people being in office who reflect your values, right? So understand who's running for office, do your research. And also when it comes to community organizing, again, I'm very big on voting rights, so mass incarceration, all these different things that affect Black people. So figure out what organization in your community or in your state is doing work around issues that affect Black and brown communities, and volunteer with them. Or again, see if you can staff them, for a paid gig. Get paid for your work, right?
That's right.
Get paid for your work.
Do that.
So what now, Nathalie?
You definitely want to do that.
You ever want to do that, right? Listen, I get paid for my work now, but in Georgia, for example, we have the New Georgia Project. We have Fair Count, we have Fair Fight, we have the NAACP, you have the ACLU of Georgia, right? All these different ways to get involved at a high level. That doesn't just focus on charity. Charity is great, right? But we're talking about systemic change.
Yeah.
If you want to make systemic change, then get involved with organizations that that do the work of bringing about systemic change, and also Black Lives Matter as well. So your local Black Lives Matter chapter, if you have one, get tapped into that too. So
awesome, definitely. We're definitely gonna have to get together again because this was so much fun.
So much fun.
So I think the next edition needs to be Candid Conversations, Do Your Homework, Ladies Night edition.
Wait, didn't we just have that?
I
know. Low key, maybe high key.
Maybe we'll do like 2.0.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Well, I love you. That's it. That's all. Says the clock on the wall. Make sure that you tune in next time. Maybe next week, maybe same time. We'll see. We'll figure it out. Again,
we're in quarantine right now.
and I am an extrovert, so this is giving me all of my life. Again, you can go to NathalieNelsonParker.com/racial grants, justice grants for a free download to find funders and organizations that are committed to funding racially just programs as well as Black and brown communities. You can go to NathalieNelsonParker.com/books to get your copy of the resource guide. Transformation starts with me, bold strategies for innovative leadership, where there are resources on how to use intentionally the transformational leader framework in your organization. And all things Nathalie Nelson Parker are at NathalieNelsonParker.com. Now, I'm going to go hug my 3-year-old, and we're probably going to kiki a little bit backstage.
Yes, Kiki.
We
Live for
love
a good
you.
Kiki.
Thank you for spending 90 minutes with Nathalie, Kara, and Amber, and we'll see you soon. And remember, do your own work.